very good morning. I'm Howard Feldman. This is the Sunday Synthesis Podcast. It's the 25th of July. We're in the middle of a bit of a cold snap in Johannesburg, trying to catch a little bit of sunshine whenever we can. But definitely the sun is starting to shine a little bit brighter. Dr. Anton Meyberg, good morning. You shouldn't be at work considering all of the good news around COVID that we are hearing. Why are you at work?
So good morning, just at work to help out. The numbers are a bit going down. They still are high, and we still need to help out to try and help with the load that our colleagues are experiencing. So there are currently 194,428,000 cases worldwide, with 4.1 million deaths and 176 million cases resolved. The United States has 35.1 million cases with 626,000 deaths. India has 31.3 million cases with 420,000 deaths. South Africa has 2,368,105 cases with 69,488 deaths and 12,056 new cases in the last 24 hours, a 24% test positivity rate. There are currently 6.3 million vaccinations that have been given in South Africa, of which 2.29 million are fully vaccinated people. In Gauteng, there are 8,101 cases in hospital with COVID-19, of which 1,169 are in ICU and 672 are ventilated. As you can definitively see, the numbers are definitely coming down.
So in terms of your hospital, your experience the last week with regard to admissions, number of deaths and people in ICU?
So there's a definitive, I'd say, a wallop, or it's unbelievable the quick change that we've seen. Last week we were sitting on about 150 COVID patients in hospital. This morning we're down to 90. So that's a big change. We've closed down 2 of the wards in the hospital. We've got ICU beds, we've got ventilators, we've got high care beds. So there's definitely a big shift in a positive way. That being said, those people in hospital are still very sick. And there's still a large proportion of people who are critical and are not doing well, but the numbers per se are coming down, the admissions are coming down, and we're definitely seeing that the lockdown and the people's behavior has changed in a way that this is helping with the numbers in hospital.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Is it just natural? Had we not locked down, what would we have seen in your view? Because we don't really know. We're not doing a control study.
I don't think you can actually say that. I don't think you can ask it because we don't know, because we did. So we can't. The one thing we've learned about this virus is that we still don't know anything about it. So there's no way we could have estimated what would have happened if we didn't. But through our experience, we know that it just would have gotten worse. And I don't know how you could get worse when you've got no beds, no ventilators. So we couldn't afford for it to get any worse. And that's why we had to have this more stringent lockdown.
Right. But good news is that it's really coming down greatly. Do you think we're seeing an impact yet of those 6 million odd people that have been vaccinated?
So interestingly enough, the majority of people that are in hospital now are people that haven't been vaccinated. So I do think that the vaccinations are already starting to show some sort of benefit to people. Even people who've only had one vaccination, there's definitely a benefit from it. And we do see breakthrough infections, but they're very minimal. A very small amount of people that are admitted to hospital with a breakthrough infection who've had the vaccination and then got the infection are in hospital, but the majority are very mild to moderate and don't need to go to ICU or to high care in hospital for a few days only.
Right. Are we seeing any difference in terms of your experience and the studies with regard to whether somebody has had the Pfizer or whether they've had Johnson & Johnson, specifically with regard to the Delta variant?
So, per se, we're not seeing a difference yet with regards to hospitalizations. The amount of people that are being admitted generally are not being people who have been vaccinated. That being said, a few studies have come out pro and some against the vaccinations. So some are saying that if you've had the Johnson & Johnson, you've got completely covered against the Delta variant. And other studies in the States are saying that if you had the Johnson & Johnson, you don't have coverage against the Delta variant. So we've got to wait for the research to come out. I must say that in my own personal experience, I haven't seen many people coming into hospital who've had the Johnson & Johnson. I must say that really, I mean, it's quite interesting to see. We've had a few people that have come in with the Pfizer who've had the first vaccination only, but I do believe those people got infected while they were in the queue or they were getting sick around that time. So I can't definitively say that the one is far more protective over the Delta variant or not. I do believe that there's definitely a benefit to spacing the Pfizer vaccination. In other words, keeping it about 42 days. I think it increases and improves the immunogenicity of the vaccine and helps with your body's adaptive and innate immunity to try and fight against it. But I think we still need a lot more time to see what the actual benefits of all these vaccinations are going to be.
Well, I guess the advantage of people that have had the Johnson is we've got more time because they were the first group that actually were vaccinated. And it was clear because it's a one-shot vaccination. So I guess there's less complexity.
I see the interesting part's going to be that if you look in Israel, where they're looking now at a third shot for people, so as a booster for people who've been vaccinated over 6 months ago. These are people who had both Pfizers and now saying they potentially need a third shot. We started the vaccinations here in about mid-February. So now if you're looking at that, the people who've had the Johnson & Johnson, after 6 to 7 months, which is August, September, are we going to be requiring a booster for the Johnson & Johnson? I think time will tell with that. We've got to wait for the further research to see, but we've also got to get the rest of the country vaccinated first.
Yeah. In terms of, as we go now, let's say we thank goodness, are moving out of the third wave. A lot more people are vaccinated. A lot of people have had COVID. Will we be able to start adjusting our behavior requirements in terms of COVID? In other words, at a synagogue, a mosque, a church, if a lot of people have been vaccinated and had COVID, are we going to start easing off on some of the requirements?
Yeah, I definitely believe that will happen. I mean, although when you're looking overseas, and if you look in the United States, you look at the United Kingdom, the numbers are flying up, yet the amount of hospitalizations of people who have been vaccinated are much lower. So it's generally you're seeing people who are unvaccinated that are going into hospital, but the numbers are dramatically increasing overseas, but yet the hospitalizations aren't. And that shows you that the vaccinations are working. So what they're doing overseas in many countries is that if you've got outdoor activities, you don't have to wear masks, but they still are being a bit careful of indoor gatherings. You have to wear masks in indoor gatherings. You still have to try and curtail to a bit, but there's definitely a bit more freedom of movement and freedom of restrictions overseas. And I do believe in the coming months, we'll be able to lower those restrictions and hopefully get to some sort of normality with vaccinated people. It's going to be very difficult with unvaccinated people, but more so easier with the vaccinated people, as long as they also keep responsible.
Well, that is interesting because this is where they are overseas in terms of arguments around a green passport, or France is saying that, we've stayed home for long enough, but so now people who aren't vaccinated, they can stay home, and people that are vaccinated can go to restaurants and places like that. And you're starting to see a lot of this in the UK as well, arguments around it. I don't know if there's
look, you're seeing this everywhere. You're seeing this in the United Kingdom, the United States. There's riots in Sydney, in Melbourne. There are riots. I mean, they've only got one case in the whole of Australia, and they're rioting. Imagine if they had more than two.
Hashtag pray for Australia.
Yeah. So I mean, people have had enough. But I mean, the point of the matter is, you need to get vaccinated. You have to get vaccinated so that we can allow ourselves to get back into some sort of normality.
Right. A number of questions around the possible side effects of the vaccine. A few people have asked me if there's any correlation between Pfizer and people becoming ill with shingles. With a number of people saying anecdotally that they've heard of a number of people. Is this a thing?
So I think that's an important question to discuss, the side effects of all the vaccinations per se. Just to make a point, there's no causal relationship between the COVID vaccine and shingles. Remember that shingles is from herpes zoster, which is a varicella virus, which causes the herpes zoster to reactivate once one has had chickenpox. Generally, what we find is people who are immune suppressed, who've got low immunity, tend to get a reactivation of the varicella, of the herpes zoster, and then get the infection. But there's no definitive data to prove that once you've been vaccinated, you're going to get shingles. So that's kind of not even listed as a side effect at this point in time. What are the side effects is that we know, and also the important thing about the side effects is we know that the risks of the vaccination, the benefits far outweigh the risks. There's no doubt about it. And that's across the board. So there's the talk of the thrombocytopenia, which is the low platelet count and the thrombosis and the clotting with the Johnson & Johnson and the AstraZeneca. There's the talk of the myocarditis with the Pfizer, as well as the fact that there's also talk of a very small proportion of Guillain-Barré syndrome with people with the Johnson & Johnson. And the Guillain-Barré is basically basically your body attacks your own neurological system, and you get a weakness of the neurological system. You can't walk, you can't lift your legs. That's a very rare thing. And it, as I said, the benefits far outweigh the risks according to that.
Somebody else also asking about vertigo, tinnitus, saying that he suffered a couple of years ago and then had the Pfizer and was quite dizzy the next day, but it seems to have continued. Could this be?
Look, I think the important thing to understand here is that this is not a live attenuated virus that you're giving people when you give them a vaccination. So it's unlikely to reactivate a virus. It's very similar to the whole shingles debate. There's no causal relationship between a vertigo being caused by a viral mechanism or shingles being caused through a viral mechanism. So it could just be that you were going to develop vertigo at that time anyway. It's unlikely. I mean, most of the side effects are headache, a bit of gastrointestinal side effects, and those generally last 24 to 48 hours, and those sort of abate after a while.
Right. A number of questions around gyms, gyms having opened up. Somebody asking, what about swimming in a pool? Does the chlorine destroy the virus?
So, when you're underwater in the pool, you should be safe. That's not the issue. The issue is getting out of the water when someone's next to you, someone coughs on you, someone's around you, when you're not wearing masks. You've got to protect yourself.
So the swimming pool itself, the water shouldn't be, it's not.
The water is not a carrier of, you don't carry the disease through chlorinated water. It's not the issue of the actual swimming. The issue is when you contact people inside the swimming pool, if you're next to them in the same lane, or you're getting out the swimming pool without masks on, that's where the problem lies.
What's our current thinking around the virus on surfaces? Right at the beginning, that was one of our major concerns. Is it still as much a concern?
I don't think it's as much as a concern. We've still got to be aware of it. We've still got to know that it can settle on surfaces. We've still got to clean surfaces meticulously, which we do. But, initially, if we look back sort of about 12 months ago, or even probably less, we used to be quite pedantic with taking a shopping bag, leaving it outside, or cleaning the shopping with disinfectant and sterilizing it and using alcohol swabs. And we don't have to do that anymore.
Taking a look at some more of the questions. Hi, Howard. Is there a reason why we have such a high rate of deaths in South Africa, between 300 and 500 per week?
So I think, it's a very good question, but you've got to understand we're dealing with extremely transmissible variant at the moment. It's known as a variant of concern. That's the Delta variant. And that's a predominant strain, not only in our country, but around the world at this point in time. People infected with it produce a much higher viral load, or much more virus, which infects them. It's far more infective than the initial or the first SARS-CoV-2 virus. And it's got a much shorter incubation period. And it's got a much higher viral load. So therefore, it can transmit much quicker, and it can make people sicker. The jury's still out whether or not people are getting sicker due to the Delta than they were from the Beta variant or from the initial variant. But as I said, what we've seen in the hospital is an amount of people that have been critically ill, and how it's hit families and extreme family members that have been in hospital together and that have surmised due to this virus has been phenomenal. So I don't believe the numbers are dramatic at the moment in our country. Every death is a tragedy, but we're not seeing thousands of deaths a day, which still boggles my mind that in our country where we've got so many people unvaccinated, we're still managing to get away, in inverted commas, without so many deaths.
Is there any research that has been done to the effectiveness of antibodies from the vaccine versus antibodies from the actual infection? Interesting.
So once again, we still don't know what we think we know about this virus. And the current thinking is that if you've been vaccinated, you've got a far higher antibody production than against someone who's got natural immunity from the actual infection. But the combination of infection and someone who's been vaccinated of those antibodies is probably the best you can have. Doesn't mean that you've got to go out there and try and get infected.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it makes me a little nervous. Michael says, thanks for these podcasts. How long after the second Pfizer vaccine can you go for the flu vaccine?
So as we always said, you've got to wait 2 weeks. And you still can have the flu vaccine. Now we're still going through a very cold spell.
So you'd still recommend
we haven't seen any influenzas for I don't know how long. We saw a few influenza Bs a few weeks ago and very minimal influenza As, but that's not the predominant strain at the moment. The predominant strain we're seeing at the moment is COVID.
Tanya wants to know, are you getting another dog? Yeah, well, just for those who might not know, you would have heard him barking incessantly during every podcast. He unfortunately shuffled off this mortal coil. That was Fred, our Yorkshire Terrier. After 13 hell of a long years, he eventually left us. And no, for those who are wondering, it was not COVID. Right.
Did you not give him ivermectin?
That's why we knew it wasn't COVID, because he was on ivermectin. I gave him a lot of extra doses of ivermectin. Yep. No, may his memory be for a blessing. My daughters are going. My daughters are going on a flight. The plane is really full. They are planning on wearing a mask and a visor. Is that sufficient? Well, I'm not sure what else you could do. A mask and a visor.
Yeah, I mean, mask and a visor. Preferable to wear an N95 mask if you can get one, albeit it may be a bit uncomfortable for the flight, but it's far more uncomfortable to get COVID than have a bit of an uncomfortable flight. So try to wear the mask and the visor. Don't drink on the plane, even if it's for a 9-hour flight, or don't eat on the plane. Try not to take your mask off. Try not to take your visor off, and just don't touch as many things as possible, and just sort of stay in your own little bubble.
Clients of ours had 2 AstraZeneca jabs in the UK. They're returning to South Africa in October and want to know if they need to have the Pfizer jab here as well on their return.
Or there's no data out about that. Yeah.
Right.
There's no data about that. And once you've had a full set of vaccination, what is the current thinking against, getting another vaccine? At this point in time, we wouldn't advise them to have another vaccination once they've had both AstraZenecas, because we just don't know what the interaction is with a double set of AstraZeneca and another mRNA virus sort of vaccine being given to them.
Brenda says, if someone suffers with a clotting disorder and is on Ecotrin, do they need to take extra Ecotrin before having their vaccine, or do they just take their normal dose?
No, normal dose.
Okay, cool. Is the vaccine effective if one is on methotrexate?
So methotrexate is an immune suppressant that's used for many conditions. It's used in rheumatoid arthritis, it's used in sarcoidosis, it's used in ulcerative colitis, a lot of immunological and autoimmune disease that's used to treat. The thinking is that people on methotrexate have got a decreased effectivity of the vaccine, and therefore, if they are going to have the vaccine, they should speak to their rheumatologist or whoever is prescribed to them, and they will tell them basically to stop the methotrexate either 10 to 14 days or a week to 10 days before they have the vaccine, and then not take it again another 7 to 10 days after the vaccine, so that they can actually get a good immunogenicity and a good uptake of the vaccine. That being said, they'll have to obviously deal with the flare-ups from their other diseases in that short period of time, whilst they're getting a good immune response from the vaccine.
Is there any evidence of increased allergies and allergic reactions after the vaccines? 2 people I know have gone into anaphylaxis after eating fish. So I
think that's the whole point of when you go for the vaccination, they keep you there for a 15 to 20 minute period after you've had the vaccine to watch for any anaphylaxis. But if you are worried, you need to make them aware of the fact that you've had anaphylaxis from fish or from peanuts or from eggs or anything like that, so they can watch you more carefully.
Joan says, how long after COVID can a person go back to work? Do you recommend a COVID test before they come back?
So still, as from the beginning, we still don't recommend a COVID test after you've had COVID and going back to work, because that viral replication rate can still be high despite you being much better. Generally, you've got to decide if you can go back to work depending on how your symptoms are. So if you've had mild COVID and you're feeling well, you're not coughing, you're asymptomatic, you've got no fever, you can go back to work within 2 weeks. it all depends on if you're on oxygen, are you symptomatic, and have you got a good effort tolerance, and have you got any other consequences of having had the virus?
Right. And Gary says, when will the third wave be over so that we can focus on our looting? I can't answer that question. That is not a question that you need to be answered. That needs to be answered after having the Pfizer vaccine. How long before one should exercise?
So the general thought is, and that's once again what we were discussing earlier about the side effects, is that one of the side effects is myocarditis, which generally happens in younger males between the ages of, let's say, 30 to 50. We recommend that you should wait about 3 to 5 days before you start exercising, just to make sure you don't have any palpitations, you don't have any chest pain, you don't have any shortness of breath related to that. But once again, the benefits far outweigh the risks of getting vaccinated against not getting vaccinated.
Some schools are, obviously we have to wait before anything happens. Today is the end of the second extension of the 4th lockdown, I think. So it's part 2.
Day 400, 5,650 billion.
I don't know, those are not numbers that I'm ever going to be able to get my head around. Either way, let's assume that the lockdown restrictions are eased this evening, as we anticipate they will be. Your feeling about schools going back?
I think we've got to remember something very important. The schools have now been doing this for over a year. They're very good at what they're doing. They know what they're doing. They know their procedures. They know their protocols. They know how important it is to keep the bubbles and to keep masks on and to make sure teachers are wearing their masks. But we've also got to take it one step forwards and say as follows: we're in a very different situation to where we were 6 or 8 weeks ago. Now the majority of teachers have been vaccinated. Now the majority or a large proportion of elderly people have been vaccinated. So that puts us in a different spin. It doesn't mean that you can be reckless. It doesn't mean you don't have to wear masks. We've still got to have the belt and suspenders analogy. In other words, you've got to still stay safe and really make sure we do things properly. But it makes things a little bit calmer. So people know that there's definitely a protection that's been sort of bestowed upon us from the vaccinations, but the schools are safe. We've always said that the schools are the safest place for our kids to be. From an emotional point of view, it's the most important place for our kids to be back at the moment. We know the numbers are going down. We've seen the community numbers are going down. We've seen the country numbers are going down, specifically more so in Gauteng. Obviously, we worry about KwaZulu-Natal, but that's a whole different kettle of fish. We'll get there at a later stage. But in our own province, in Gauteng, the numbers are going down. Our community numbers are going down. It's now time to get back to school. It's time to get these kids back to school. My approach would be to stagger the kids back to school. Obviously, don't send everyone back on the same day, so that you can see that things are done 100% easier and they can follow the rules and they can see that there's no issues, and then gradually bring everybody back in, which is the best way to do it, because then you can actually I just saw a dog in the background there.
No, but that wasn't Fred. It's Fred.
So there's no reincarnation there.
You would have just heard. Yeah.
Okay, good. So yes, I think it's safe to go back to school.
Right. Same as mosques, synagogues, churches.
I do believe that, that it's time for these things to start reopening. I do believe it's safe. I still believe the numbers should be very small. They should be well aerated. Windows should be open, if possible, to pray outside. Small crowds below the number of 50, as well as the fact that people over the age of 60 with comorbidities should just be very careful, especially if they haven't been vaccinated. It's a no-no. They shouldn't be anywhere near any of these religious institutions. But people with comorbidities over the age of 60 need to be just far more careful still. We've got to ease our way back into these things slowly so we can continue going in the right direction.
Right. So there actually is a lot of good news.
Yeah. So there's lots of good news. Okay. The kids will hopefully start going back to school from tomorrow. That's a huge bonus. The numbers in the hospitals are going down. Beds are available. We're closing down wards in our hospital because we've now got a small amount of people needing these type of wards. I'm going to start opening up for what we call green cases. And I believe that we can start opening up religious institutions. Look, this is all obviously dependent on Uncle Cyril tonight, if he gives us the go-ahead. So there's lots of good news. We're definitely in a better position we are today than we were last week and the week before and the week before. We've just got to maintain that belt and suspenders analogy. We have to keep safe so that we can really make sure that we stay out of this third wave and get back to some sort of normality. And to quote, when it snows, you have two choices: shovel or make snow angels.
Absolutely love that. I'm Howard Feldman. This has been the Synthesis Sunday podcast with Dr. Anton Meyberg, with me, Howard Feldman. Please send us your questions for next week. Don't forget to subscribe below, and we'll keep bringing you information every week as you need it. Have a great week. Be warm, be safe, be kind, and God bless.